Tell me about your vision.
Well, Harry, I'm I've been in publishing for a long time, and part of the reason that I'm in publishing is because I know that books change people's lives, and I know that firsthand because uh, I majored in journalism in college. I went to Indiana University, and back then I was working on the campus newspaper, and I was, as I look back on my life, I realized I was rebelling from my upbringing, from my parents, and I was on this big campus, Indiana University, 30,000 students on the main campus, and I was working on the college paper, and I couldn't get my fingers on the right keyboard, and so I kept muttering to myself, "Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ," and this little blonde haired girl that was sitting next to me turned to me and she said, "Oh, Terry, don't say that about Jesus because one of these days when you really need him, you'll call out for him and he won't be there." And I thought, what's this? I'm a Christian. I go to church when I'm at home. I read the Bible in church when I'm at home. I knew nothing, Harry, about really Christianity, but she invited me to go to this little bookstore a couple blocks off the Indiana campus. They had pretty cards and posters, and maybe I'd find a book that interested me. So I wandered down there a couple days later. I bought this book called Jesus the Revolutionary. I thought, how in the world could Jesus be a revolutionary? And so I took that book back to my room. I read that book, and it showed me a different side of Jesus than I'd ever seen before. And about that time, somebody invited me to this Jesus people gathering in downtown Bloomington. People were sitting on little scraps of carpets with little candles lit. And I knew from being in that room that those people had something that I didn't have. So I got a Bible and I changed the direction of my life. So instead of becoming a newspaper reporter, which is what I thought I was going to do, I joined this group called Wycliffe Bible Translators and studied linguistics. I worked in Guatemala, Central America, among the Southwest Cachiquel people. Uh, then I wandered back to my writing, and that's kind of where I've been ever since. But I wouldn't have made those kind of choices if I hadn't read this book years ago. So I know books change people's lives firsthand because I read this book and it changed my life.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. So how did that land you today where you are at right now? Like, how did the journey from reading a book to becoming an author yourself?
Yeah, that's a great question. I started writing for magazines, and I ultimately became the editor of my our missions newspaper, Wycliffe Bible Translators, and I went to writers' conferences, and that's always a thing that I encourage people to do is to go to a writers' conference because you can meet editors and you can learn a ton about how the publishing business works if you do that. So I was at one of these writers' conferences and I was talking with an editor, and she said, "Terry, I've got this problem." And we do children's books at David C. Cook, and we're charged really to write to encourage children to go to the world with their lives, but we don't have a single book that talks about that. So, what kind of ideas do you have? Well, at that time, my kids were little, so I was reading a lot of children's books to kids, and I knew that Stephen Lawhead, who writes fantasy books, also had this set of children's books that he wrote under the name Steve Lawhead, and they combined a real photo with a little cartoon character to show kids that to help them get into the imagination part of the story. Howard had a hot air balloon. Howard had a spaceship. And so I said to the editor, what if we combined real pictures from our mission work around the world with a little cartoon character to show kids that they could go anywhere? She said, "Oh, that's a good idea. Write that up and send that to me." And so I made a little note. I went home, I wrote it up, and we went through a number of versions of that book before it actually got published. But in 1992, that was my first book, Harry, that was published called When I Grow Up, I Can Go Anywhere for Jesus, a little 32-page children's book that I wrote.
That's awesome. Wow. Thank you for sharing that. So, what would you say, Terry, is your why about your vision? Like, why do you do what you do now?
Yeah, the why I do what I do is I work in publishing. I've been working at a New York publishing house, Morgan James Publishing, now for the last 13 years. It's my third publisher. So I've worked with hundreds of authors through the years. And I guess the reason I do this and get up every day and do this kind of work is because these books are important. And I know the messages that are inside them are important to the authors. And I just want to help them get out there and be successful. So one of the things that I know from working in this too, Harry, is that many authors have false expectations about their book and what's going to happen with it. So I wrote this little book called 10 Publishing Myths, Insights Every Author Needs to Succeed. And I want people to be able to get this book. So I've set up this website. If they go to publishingoffer.com, they can get the book for only $10 from me, along with over $200 worth of free bonuses. And that includes the shipping and everything. And part of the reason I did that is because I really want authors to understand there's a lot in the publishing process that they can't control. It's outside of things that they can do. But there are a number of things that they can do. And so I really tried to emphasize in this book practical actions that every author can take to help spread the news about their book and get the word out there about it.
Yeah, that's awesome. That's amazing. Thank you for sharing that with me. I have one more question for you before we end today's segment. Um, do you have a story that pertains to your why that you want to share with the audience today?
Well, yeah, the biggest story that I have related to my why is that life changing decision that I told you I made reading that book,
Hmm.
Jesus the Revolutionary. That was the story behind my why. But one of the another story that comes to mind is I was a literary agent for a while, and Mark Victor Hansen, the co-author from Chicken Soup for the Soul, invited me to come out to Los Angeles. He was having this event called Mega Book Marketing University, and so I went to this event and I took pitches from people during the event. But I also sat there with 400 people and listened to all the different speakers. And at that point in my life, Harry, I'd written about 50 books for traditional publishers. So publishers were paying me advances. They were making pretty books. They were getting them in the bookstore, all that kind of thing. But my books weren't making money because once a year or maybe quarterly, publishers send you a financial statement, and all of mine were in the minus category. And so I just didn't know what I was. I must be doing something wrong. I just couldn't figure out what it was. As I listened to these people, I realized how little I was actually doing to be telling people about my own book. Back then, sure, I had a terrywhalen.com website, but I was doing hardly anything else to be telling people. And one of the speakers at this event was Jack Canfield, the other co-author on the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. And Jack has this book called The Success Principles,
Yeah.
where he really studies what does it take to be successful. The very first success principle says that I will take 100% responsibility for my own success.
Mm.
Now, none of us want to take 100% responsibility. We want some publisher or some marketing person, somebody other than us, to do the work. But I decided back right there that I was going to take 100% responsibility for my own success. So I started to blog, and I've been blogging, Harry, since like 2004. I got in on the early days of blogging, but I've been blogging every week since 2004. Now, they say there's over 600 million blogs that are out there, but I found an article about a year ago that listed the top 27 content producers out there.
Mhm.
And Seth Godin, Ryan Holiday, people like that. And my name was among those 27. And it's not that I've done anything magical here. I've just been consistently blogging every week for years. And suddenly that builds up to be a huge volume of material. I've got over 1,700 entries in my blog. I mean, there's a lot of content in that thing. And it's helped a lot of people, and it just shows me that everybody can do this. You just have to do it Persistently and consistently is really what it takes in order to be able to find success when it comes to book publishing.
Thank you for being here today. I'm really happy that you tuned in to Vision Pros Live. I'm looking forward to seeing your reactions as these episodes continue to move forward. This is going to get more and more fun. We'll have more and more engagement as well. We'll invite people to participate in the show. And thank you for giving us your time and attention. Have an excellent time building out your vision and becoming a Vision Pro yourself.